Okay, if you know anything about me, I really, really, really love movies, especially sci-fi. And one of the big, weirdest things that I talk about with my friends all the time is the lack of this standard when it comes to CGI these days. And I'm just gonna bring this up automatically because I saw this tweet last night, and I found a video we could talk about, but this is a tweet saying that the backwards progression of CGI needs to be studied, and I completely agree. This was 18 years ago, which the CGI still holds up to this day. Just look at this CGI for Davy Jones. It's incredible. 18 years ago. And obviously my computer's not going to be showing you the best fidelity of it, obviously. But then there's a quote by this man named Lex, who claims that his dad animated Davy Jones in the movie. An answer for why CGI has gotten worse is extremely simple. The animators are worked harder and treated worse than they were 2 decades ago, assuming their jobs haven't been outsourced entirely. Want good CGI? Support CGI workers and also pay for good CGI as well. This isn't just the movie industry. I've seen signs of this in the gaming industry as well, where companies, I'm not going to say who, but we've all heard the rumors, where they're outsourcing their coding and the development of the game to different studios that will do the work cheaper, obviously, and they're getting paid to pretty much be middlemans, which I think is ridiculous. Delegation is great at the very top, but when you have the little grunts, I'm not trying to be demeaning or anything like that, but when you have the people that are actually supposed to do the groundwork and they're delegating that overseas, I think it's ridiculous. But that's all speculation at this point. We're gonna watch this video by CGI, and it's pretty much why did Davy Jones look so realistic. I'm so interested in this topic, man.
Davy Jones is often regarded as the best looking CGI character of all time, but
especially at the time. At the time, come on, bro. Think of back in the day, all the amazing CGI, like Transformers, Pirates Caribbean with the Davy Jones. There's a long list. Just comment down below, that time period. It was stacked.
Why? Because whilst he was the first ever character to use that on-set motion capture technology, which meant that his actor, Bill Nighy, could be present on the film set and actually able to interact with the cast around him being the first means that every other CG character that followed him also,
oh my god, I forgot about the Cats movie, Jesus Christ,
interact with the cast around him. Him being the first
I forgot this even came out, Jesus,
means that every other CG character that followed him.
And then you have the lizard up here, to be fair with the I forgot his name, something dwarf, Wolfenstein. No, not Wolfenstein, whatever his name is, from the Justice League movie. Snyder Cut was amazing. People that hate on the Justice League movie, just go watch the Snyder Cut. I know it's fucking 20 hours long, but it's so good. The rest of these are actually pretty good too. But yeah, the Cats one is ridiculous.
Also had access to the same technology. In fact, they presumably had access to better versions of it.
Yes.
So why did we get such diminishing returns in quality when surely they should have just gotten better and better and better? Well, this is exactly the question we're going to answer in this video by breaking down why Davy Jones works so well and where all of these other characters are going so wrong, and why all of this transcends just the use of CGI and comes down to something a lot more than that. So let's dive into the soggy world of Davy Jones's visual effects and definitively answer once and for all why he was the pinnacle of photorealism. So I believe a massive reason why Jones looks so realistic comes from the fact that the primary point of focus for this character isn't on epic action scenes or big dramatic speeches, but instead on pure emotionality.
Also, the art design is amazing. For instance, when you go back to this shot of the Hobbit, it's so overly exposed. It just looks bad to me. And then with Thanos, I think it looked phenomenal. Now, did the Endgame scene look like CGI? Yes, it did. The background looked fake as hell. It did. But there was a lot of practical effects that they used when they did the close-ups on the actual fights. So I will give it a pass. And also, it had the culmination of 18 different movies or something like that. This has never been done before. The hype was at its highest it's ever going to be at. So yes, This CGI was amazing.
Dramatic speeches, but instead
It's
on pure emotionality. Because underneath that soggy wet skin and living tentacle beard, Davy Jones is just a regular guy who's been twisted and tortured by the choices of his past, and all of that is brought to.
But let's not. Okay, what was this? When the world ends, or I forgot what this Pirates 3 was called. But Pirates 4, they completely ruined his character, in my opinion. Actually, no. This was Davy Jones' Locker. Pirates 3, amazing movie, but they completely destroyed his character. Just nuked it.
Life via both
Still a
this
good movie,
raw stage presence that he had, but also by the technical workings going on behind the scenes that had to be elevated to such a high level to allow such an emotionally driven performance to be crafted completely out of CGI. Because in using that on-set motion capture technology, his actor, Bill Nighy, had the opportunity to infuse Jones with something
I'm not gonna lie, I had no idea that Bill Nye played him. That's insane.
genuinely human, because unlike CG villains in other films who are primarily present in just action scenes and maybe one or two other dialogue scenes, most of Davy Jones's appearances are instead just pure dialogue. In fact, in Dead Man's Chest, I don't think Jones has a single action scene, and so this means that for an entire film, everything about Jones was centered purely around the character's dialogue, reactions, and
Did Bill Nye deliver the dialogue as well? I'm actually going to look that up real quick because I don't think that's the case. I think they had a voiceover for it. Did Bill Nye deliver Davy Jones lines? Bill Nye breaks down his most iconic character, everything he says about... No. What was Davy Jones' famous line? Did Bill Nye voice? Yes, there we go. Davy Jones is a fictional character. Yeah. He is portrayed through motion capture by Bill Nye and voiced by, what's this? Nighy and Robin Atkin Downs. Amazing performance by them. The collaboration by them. Amazing. Where are we? Right here.
Interactions, in addition to all of these emotional subtleties going on just underneath the surface of his performance, all of which work to build Jones up into this living, breathing person who can actually respond to the events around him with believable and predictable emotion. But now, obviously, a great performance alone isn't enough for good CGI, because you can have the best actor in the world and it can still look pretty bad. So there's got to be a technical side to this performance as well. Something going on under the surface that allowed this digital facial performance to manifest itself as unbeatably realistic. And now you might immediately think, well, that's just because it's motion captured, right? They just recorded Bill Nye's face and mapped that onto Davy Jones, and that's why it looks so realistic. But this is absolutely not the case. In fact, this is one of the biggest misdirections around VFX and CG characters, and it's been purposefully spread by the film studios, because in reality, motion capture is never good enough for the final performance that goes up on a big cinema.
I'm sure. I don't know how the sensors work exactly, but I'm sure there's going to be some interference and they're not 100% accurate, I'm sure.
Screen.
So obviously you have to have someone go in on the back end and make sure everything is smooth, you know.
And so more often than not, this data is only ever really used as a baseline or a reference point, and animators still have to go in and rework this entire performance themselves. And so by only saying, oh yeah, we used motion capture to get the actor's authentic performance, and then omitting the second part where these animators slaved away for hours on the back end, the studios can distance themselves from the negative press CGI gets and come out of this looking like they actually care about art. And so if it's animators and other artists who are the ones refining the performances of all of these motion captured characters, what is the technical factor that gave Jones's performance an edge over the rest of them?
Also, I would have to say, and I know he's probably going to say the animators themselves were amazing at what they did, which I'm sure is the case because they're obviously pushing like a new technology. Like people take pride in that when you're pushing innovation in your movie. Obviously, George Lucas is huge with that. There's a lot of different film directors and pioneers in the film industry that have pushed film in a tremendous way. And when you're on that cutting edge, you want to not just, you know, push something forward that's never been done before, but try to execute it as best as possible. And I know that's a tedious process to go through. I don't know this, but I'm assuming it is, right? But I would also say to the point where you're having animators go on the back end of it and actually adjust things and make sure they're correct. It doesn't just provide a service where you can make sure everything's stable and be how it's supposed to be, but it's also a great opportunity to improve the physical features and movements, maybe of the face or whatever it might be, body language in general, by the actor. You can go back and improve and do stuff that isn't physically even possible, or maybe that the actor was just not able to tap into. Which is also an amazing service. I didn't realize that this was the case, but I understand now. It makes complete sense that it is.
I believe this edge came from the fact that seemingly the VFX artists have done everything they possibly can to occlude as much of Jones's skin as possible from the audience, as skin is probably the single hardest thing to get looking right with CGI, because in real life it's so flipping complex.
Yeah, it's fucking weird, man. When I even take I know this firsthand, because when I do my thumbnails, I'll take pictures, and if my hands are in them, my hands are normal size and everything, but it just looks weird because of the perspective of the camera and stuff like that. And you notice little things that just throw you off, and it's almost like when you're talking in the, if you speak English and then you read a word and you're like, that doesn't seem like it's spelled, but that's actually how it's spelled. Why is it spelled like that? I'll just get in these weird situations where I'm questioning everything about how something's spelled or pronounced or whatever it might be, and it just doesn't feel right, but it's actually accurate. Even though I've spelled the word a million times or said it a million times, it's just that weird feeling. It's the same thing when you look deeply at the human body or at the skin or anything like that. It's just there's certain things that just feel off sometimes. You know what I mean?
With even the tiniest of movements generating.
So having that perspective, having that, and then a viewer seeing something as well that's animated, and you're trying to make it as realistic as possible. It's kind of a conundrum to balance, right?
A myriad of subtle responses across our skin, like bulging, stretching, wrinkles, color deformation, etc. And so to create a realistic CG character, you also have to perfectly recreate all of these details as well, which means the more skin you show, then the more and more of these subtleties you need to account for. Meaning if you take a character who's showing a lot of skin like Thanos or Azog the Defiler from The Hobbit, then you have to do a lot more work with their skin to keep them looking realistic than you would with Davy Jones. Because yeah, you need to generate all of these skin responses for him too, but only for his face, because they'd hidden his entire body and even the top of his head under multiple layers of much easier to do and a lot less important to an emotional performance CGI clothing. And this meant the artists only had to focus their efforts on this crucial facial area, allowing them much more time to refine it to a high level than if they also had to account for the rest of his body's skin. And so when you combine this high level animation with all of those brilliant subtle facial movements and inclinations in Bill Nighy's performance, and tie all that in with Jones's beautiful tragedy of a backstory, it gives you this genuinely compelling character with a powerful narrative, and it actually makes it quite hard to see Jones as something generated inside of a computer when both his animation and the building blocks of his character are just this strong.
So what I'm hearing is the direction for Davy Jones was amazing. Planned ahead, thought through, something that it seems like is lacking in the industry today. I think Thanos was done very well, even though his skin was exposed a lot. I didn't ever think oh my god, the CGI is terrible. Back in the day when the first Avengers movie came out, we got that first teaser with Thanos at the very end, sitting on his throne. The CGI is awful, but at the time I thought it was decent, right? It got better and better and better. I mean, we've seen terrible CGI in different movies, and then they correct it, and it's typically around art direction, in my opinion. For instance, Sonic, the first rendition of his appearance, it was just horrid. It was something out of Five Nights at Freddy's, or some dark, evil parody of Sonic. So I think art direction is one of the biggest things that's important as well. And like you're saying, covering up the skin and stuff like that makes it easier to work with. But you still have to walk and the actor still has to feel like a real character. For instance, with The Mandalorian, obviously Pedro Pascal wasn't the guy actually in the suit. They had, who was it? I forgot who the kid was. It was stuntman, but he was tremendous. Like he walked like a Western character. He felt like a Western character. His body movement, the stunting and everything like that was phenomenal. So having these different layers and things put together to create a character like this is key. It's huge.
But now, there is still more to a good CG character than just their performance. So in mentioning characters like Azog, this does bring me to my next point.
I think this character looks terrible, in my opinion. I think a lot of the CGI in The Hobbit was boring, and I think, honestly, the Hobbit movies in general were easy to sleep through.
Which is that Davy Jones is just the perfect example of using CGI where you actually need CGI and then doing something completely different with the opportunities that CGI presents. Because if you look at Azog or other similar villains, aside from his massive height, did he really need to be CGI? Because they do nothing special with him being CGI. No. It doesn't unlock any new narrative potential or interesting fight scenes or anything really. And so that,
I actually think it makes using him as CGI is kind of a deficit. I don't know if they use a character to portray him like they did with Davy Jones. I'm assuming not, which is actually kind of a hindrance on the overall experience of making that film, because then the characters that are fighting with him, they have to, okay, you're going to pretend like you're avoiding a big swinging sword or something like that. It just makes the performance a little bit harder, and then they have to go back and create him around the situation, which I think is just stupid. I think a lot of IPs nowadays, whether they be new or old, they're going to use CGI in the worst ways possible. I think Star Wars does this too much now, because Star Wars has always been big on practical effects with obviously like the puppets and all that kind of stuff, but in the beginning of The Mandalorian, there was a lot of practical stuff where it seemed like it was needed, and they had a new technology with the Saphir or whatever you want to call it. But now it feels like, for instance, with the Ahsoka show, everything was CGI, and it felt like everything was fake. It felt like they were in a big empty room, and they would have a couple props set up, or maybe some CGI trees that they would cut down. It really got irritating to me, honestly. So I don't know. Bad CGI is easy to spot out. We've seen a lot of it in this Disney Plus shows, Marvel and Star Wars, primarily. But it's all over, man. It's really, really a huge hindrance. And I get it. Animators are so talented nowadays, and video games have boomed tremendously, so there's obviously going to be more demand, and there's more examples of I guess CGI or just realistic goodness gracious animation that's just mind-bending, honestly. But sometimes lean into practical effects as much as you can, and it might be easier for your actors. It might be easier for a choreograph. It might be just, I don't know. I'm not an expert on this field, but I really think that bad CGI is a really easy ticket to kind of destroy immersion in something.
That just leaves this bitter taste in your mouth, because you're sat there looking at this unappealing blob thinking, why? Why did they do this? None of the orcs in the original Lord of the Rings were CGI, and they all looked brilliant. But with Davy Jones, the filmmakers went out of their way to do interesting things with him being CGI. Like having him dramatically play the organ with
this fucking scene, bro,
with this beard of tentacles and all the characterization that comes along with that, or hiding a key in there as part of the narrative, or just straight up murdering a guy with them, all of which couldn't have been done without CGI, and yet works to bring the audience something completely new and very much helps to justify the use of it. But what made this beard truly genius and crucial to Jones's realism is how said beard takes this whole skin hiding technique we mentioned earlier to the next level, as by having it cover only his lower face, they drew a perfect line between having humanoid features and achieving photorealism. Because whilst this beard did still present the VFX artist with its own set of challenges, such as having to write custom programs to calculate the sticky yet autonomous movements of each tentacle, if Jones didn't have this beard and we could instead see his chin and his neck, then not only would the VFX artist have to again account for all the tiny little muscles in there whenever he spoke or breathed, but more importantly, Jones would begin to look look closer and closer to your average human. And this means he would begin to edge into the territory known as the uncanny valley, which is a scientific phenomenon where the closer to a human something fake looks, the more likely our brains are to reject it. Because we are so used to looking at human faces and features that once something is sufficiently close enough to looking like a...
People told me that, I heard so many people, no one told me this. I heard that this CGI was terrible. I thought this was actually pretty damn good, honestly. Now, the whole premise of it, you know, the guy being dead and everything, that's kind of that's a whole different topic, but I think the CGI was pretty good.
Real human, our brains kick in and begin to subconsciously criticize it and pull it apart and just find these tiny little subconscious flaws with it. And so that's
a big, yes, I was about to say this one was probably the worst one, the deepfake, in my opinion. Now, it looked pretty fucking good, but it was off. It did not look like Luke. It looked like someone that looked like Luke. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't Luke. I knew it wasn't Luke. You know, but it looked like him a little bit. It's just something about it was off.
That's why a photorealistic CG human still hasn't really been done yet without the use of deepfakes and stuff. Whereas you have no idea what a living tentacle beard should 100% correctly look like. And so by giving him this fantastical beard, they pulled Jones out of the uncanny valley, stopping our brains from reading him as a fellow human face, which in turn stops that criticism instinct from kicking in, and therefore lets our brains relax around him and more easily accept him as something real. But this was only the tip of the brilliance of this beard, because what made this even more genius was that by keeping the elements of his face that are crucial to portraying emotion, like the eyes, the mouth, and these somewhat eyebrow things, on full display to the audience, whilst only changing the secondary emotional elements of his face, like his skin texture and of course his entire lower face of the beard, then they struck this perfect balance of a character whose face can tell any story, whilst also having such alien features that our brains just accept it, therefore crafting a balance of an emotional human character and CGI realism that very few other characters have ever managed to find. And now from here, speaking of his skin, this does bring us to another really major factor that contributed to his realism. The genius use of lighting in this film and how that plays so...
Yeah, lighting is key, art direction is key. This is why a lot of CGI falls on their face. I feel like this is probably one of the biggest reasons why the CGI in The Hobbit just bored me to death. It just looked bad. You know, when you think of orcs and stuff like that, you think of greasy guys, and it showed the old footage of the orcs, right? And they were greasy looking, slimy looking, and then you look at the other guy, he looks like he just, you know, washed his face and put some moisturizer on because his face was too dry. Like, he looked not greasy at all, not realistic at all.
Well with the reflective design of his constantly wet skin. Because around 90% of the time in these films, Davy Jones is shown under one of two types of lighting. Either the intense Caribbean sun or the shadowy nighttime, both of which massively complement his visual effects. Because visual effects is a bit like a magic trick. It's an illusion designed to trick your brain. And much like a real magic trick, the less you show your audience, the more they're going to believe in your illusion. And so, dark lighting is obviously...
Yeah, it's because his face being lit up highlights certain features and wrinkles and textures, and I feel like that's a reason why I always thought that Davy Jones looked so much better and realistic than these guys. Like, these guys look animated. They look like CGI has done its magic on them. Like, especially this guy right here, his face looks so cartoony compared to like everyone else. Like, I get the fish guy, he's different looking, and some of these other characters, but this guy, dude, he looks like Mario fell into the sea.
They're going to believe in your illusion. And so, dark lighting is obviously ideal for this, because all of this darkness is just going to occlude your CGI naturally. But how does pure daytime brightness hide anything? Well, this plays in masterfully with the reflective nature of his skin, and this is why films like Transformers and the first Iron Man look so good in the bright daytime, because these bright reflections can get so bright that they too technically occlude detail, because the reflective surface just turns into this bright, overexposed, detailless highlight. And when you combine this with the heavy shadows also cast by bright daylight, which plunge areas of the character into darkness, you suddenly have quite a high amount of your character naturally.
Hence, going back to the Hobbit orc, his face was like matte. It didn't highlight anything.
Really occluded from the audience. And then this reflectivity also goes to the next level with Davy Jones because of a thing VFX artists call subsurface scattering. which in very short is why stuff like, for example, lighter skin has that milky haze to it, because when light penetrates it, it bounces around within it for a while, diffusing itself within like the blood vessels in the skin and stuff, and causing that cloudy look, and then bouncing back out to our eyes again. And so because this is a natural phenomenon, to look real, CGI skin also needs to replicate this too. But all of this light bouncing around within the surface of an object is a flipping lot for a computer to calculate and get looking right, particularly back in 2005, which is actually why a lot of characters had...
Oh my fuck. I love this movie. I love the actual Scorpion King movie, but I love this movie. But yes, the CGI on this is so bad.
That rubbery plastic look back then, because the computers just weren't able to calculate this under the skin light diffusion correctly. However, if you were to cover that skin with something reflective, say water, then a lot of that light will just get bounced away instead, thus reducing the need for this light diffusion effect, and therefore making it much easier.
This is why CJ Tarkin is so sweaty.
To get a realistic result. And so, as the cursed captain of the seas, Davy Jones could believably have constantly wet skin and could therefore uniquely take advantage of all of these reflectivity perks in a way that basically no other CGI character can, which further massively enhances his visual quality, especially when in comparison to every other character. And so with all of this, it finally brings me on to those subtle little details that add the icing on the cake to Davy Jones's visual quality. Stuff like how these films were packed with real stunts, explosions and sets and miniatures, all of which accumulate to make a much more real and visceral film experience that could have very easily have gotten lost if these films incorporated too much CGI. Or another big thing that gets overlooked, no pun intended, is the height of Davy Jones relative to his actor. Because nowadays, CG character heights can be whatever you want them to be, which means that on set you have actors crawling around in contraptions to compensate for these new heights and postures. And this has to detract from the realism to some degree. And
go back and watch the first Avatar. Dude, I remember when people thought that CGI was breakthrough. I thought it was a breakthrough. It was. It looks so bad now. It's wild.
So when you have Bill Nighy basically standing at Jones's height, it just allows for that further level of authenticity that other films can't really reach. And so overall, I think a lot of these interesting little decisions came from the director himself, Gore Verbinski, having come from a VFX background, as he'd worked in VFX for many years prior to making these films, and so probably had a great sense of the limits of CGI and what to do and not to do with it, and how to tie all of this up with a pretty bow on top and make a great looking CG character. And so, in short, Davy Jones is just the perfect example of stacking the deck in your favour by getting everything right, particularly the lighting, the skin and the clothes. And it's something that modern CGI characters just don't seem to do anymore, making it harder and harder for them to reach.
I really do think that the Marvel CGI from Endgame was much better than most of these examples that he's
that same bar of visual perfection. But you know what? I'm actually perfectly fine with that, because I don't want to see the same thing every time of a CG character covered in clothes at night and made to be soaking wet just to be reflective. I want to see variety. And so it's great that these big budget films are trying to push the envelope each and every time to evolve CGI technology and hopefully bring us new and different stories. However, there is still a lot that modern day projects can learn from Davy Jones, because if your budget is low or your timeline is tight, you really should take these advantages where you can. But what do you guys think? Are there any CG characters that have progressed beyond Davy Jones? And if so, why do you think that these characters worked where so many others have failed? Oh, and also, I just wanted to give a massive shout out and thank you to my first ever Patreon subscriber, Darth Gator. Your support honestly means a lot, and thank you so much for supporting the channel. But yeah, if you like this video and you want to see more deep dives into the best VFX of the last 20 years, then please let me know in the comments below, drop a like and subscribe. Oh, and we also have a Discord channel where we chat about all of this stuff too.
Dude, CGI? I'm not subscribed, but I'm definitely subscribing. 107k subscribers, dude. Go subscribe. Tell them the Ether sent you. I think Davy Jones is really probably the best CGI character ever made. I really do. And like you said, loading the deck, you had to have everything perfect, and the direction going into it was dialed in to 100. So yeah, I think there have been a lot of... There's been a lot more bad CGI than good CGI in the, you know, in the latest years, but I don't know. I can't name a character where it just stands out to me where I'm like, yeah, that was the best CGI character ever. I don't know. Comment down below what y'all think. And I'll agree with you or disagree with you on what y'all say. Let's read the comment section real quick. I remember watching and not even questioning Davy Jones appearing. Crazy how they hired an actual cursed pirate for this movie. What? Cursed pirate? What? Not gonna lie, he was truly terrifying yet mystical. Yeah, dude, that movie was fucking freaky, bro. I fucking love that movie. I love the third one as well, but I am very disappointed in like a lot of the plot threads they didn't expand on. Like for instance, Elizabeth Swann's dad, he had like a whole plot line that just got like thrown out of the movie. And then on top of that, Davy Jones was a complete side character in that movie. There was a bunch of like wonky stuff that they did with it, and they didn't expand on it later on. Unfortunately, there's a lot of shitty pirate movies that came after that. But hopefully, and I know Johnny Depp said he would never work with Disney again, but hopefully he does. I really hope he does because he belongs in that role. I wish they would get the whole gang back together, honestly. I'm a professor teaching us 3D animation who had worked on the film. Oh, I've had, not he is. He heavily emphasized on the laborious nature of Davy Jones CGI, and while he's proud of the final outcome, he wasn't fond of how difficult and time consuming the task was. I don't think there are many studios that would be willing to go this far with CGI ever again. And that is, I think, the truest travesty. And also, that kind of reflects back to what this guy said. He said, animators are worked harder and treated worse than they were 2 decades ago, assuming their jobs haven't been outsourced entirely. Now, to this point, I'm an outsider, obviously. What do I know? But I'm assuming that technology has gotten a lot much easier. Animation and CGI, ability has. It's kind of like how graphics cards, like using AI, they've gotten to ability where they can hit really high frames and it can look really good, but it's still not the. It's a blur to it. It's not the same concept. Like there's still a lack of detail, even with hitting that threshold of excellence, even though it might not get right to the top where Davy Jones is because they're missing the detail and stuff like that. That's why it's a true art with CGI. I really think that if you truly want to have a huge blockbuster movie, especially if it has any kind of fictional aspect to it, sci-fi, fantasy, whatever it might be, you're gonna need to play with that. And I think there's a lot of scenes nowadays where you have like a mass fight, like a big fight in a fantasy setting, where it's kind of disappointing because back in the day, you had the original Lord of the Rings movies, which looked phenomenal, and obviously there's most of it's all practical stuff. And then instead they just rather render in a big fight of people. It's like, what are we doing, man? What? Like, yes, it might be harder and it might be more difficult, but like if you truly want your movie to stand alone, test time, you got to put in that extra effort, and which should cost more. So I don't know. It's everyone's gonna be like blaming the other side, it's management and they're treating us bad, and then other people will be like, oh, they're not working hard and they're probably outsourcing things to other people and whatever it might be. I don't know. But it is this whole video, this whole concept of Davy Jones looking so fucking good 18 years ago is crazy. And this video is a year old too. That's even wilder. So 19 years ago. Wow. Wow, we need some more pirate movies, bro. Some bangers. I don't want to see Blackbeard ever again, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on, bro. But yeah, that's my overall thoughts on this situation and then this video. I hope you liked my reaction. My name is Trey Swish. This is the Ether. I'm not the Ether. We are. Hit that sub button to join the Ether. Comment down below your thoughts on this situation. Am I tripping? Is there like really good movies with CGI these days that pretty much make Davy Jones outdated? Comment down below so I can be like, oh yeah, or maybe I haven't even seen it and I can go check it out for myself. There's been so many good movies with CGI. I'm kind of being cynical about the whole situation, but it's just when I see bad CGI, it just pisses me off. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth, I guess. But yeah, that's the video. Comment down below, like the video, help push it out to more people, and hit that sub button, man. I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.